Interphase Video presents Fairfield Today. Brought to you by Fairfield Federal Savings and Loan, Fairfield Medical Center, Fairhope Hospice and Palliative Care, the Fairfield County Board of Developmental Disabilities, Dagger Law, and the Frank E. Smith Funeral Home.
Hello and welcome to Fairfield Today. My name is Rick Schneider, community educator with Fairhope Hospice and Palliative Care. We are the home of the Pickering House, and it's kind of a special show today because we're outside at the entrance, one of the entrances to the Pickering House. And joining me is our CEO, Denise Bauer. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Rick. Always.
And we have a special guest. Would you care to introduce him?
I would be very honored to introduce. We have Kermit Welty, and he is one of our spiritual care coordinators here.
Thank you for the privilege.
And in fact, it's kind of interesting having a chaplain on. We're in the middle of a pandemic, and we have many, I guess, where we have to kind of, we'll see what we can do situations in hospice. It's never too much cut and dry. And in this case, we have the pandemic, and we've had to make adjustments. So as far as being the chaplain, first of all, I guess, what are your duties? And then we can show how that has kind of been adjusted, if you want to call it that.
I think the fundamental aspect of being a chaplain is working with patients and their families. We're wanting to make sure that they're at peace with their all relationships, whether it's children, spouse, extended family, themselves, or God. That's the ultimate job that we are trying to do, and we try to work within the person's personal belief system, whatever that might be.
So you do, normally you do a lot of visits to the home, or?
Yes, of course, at this time, there's a lot of restrictions placed on that. We're not going into homes unless it's where the family really needs a chaplain for some spiritual concern. Then we go into the home, and then we take the full precautions that are dictated by the agency.
Absolutely. And I guess, how have you had to adjust? Do you still make home visits at all? Or? Yes,
we're making a few home visits. I'd say since the pandemic, maybe running at about 10% of my caseload as home visits at the most, because most of them we're doing by telehealth, where we're on the phone or FaceTime or something similar to that.
Well, Denise, it's starting to rain. You're kind of going to sleep here.
I don't really sit at this entrance a lot. A lot of times this is the entrance where patients come and go, and you can see the Anita M. Turner Grief Center behind us, which we don't get to show that a lot on our program.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we're kind of outside because we're trying to socially distance in the fresh air, and because we took our masks off to tape so you can understand us. And but yeah, it's going to be fun. We're going to hear the raindrops on the metal roof today, and so another way to celebrate our life, right?
Absolutely. It shows another aspect of our campus, really. A lot of people aren't aware, and that's the Grief Center, the AMT Center.
Well, I remember when we had this program back in a long time ago, 14 years ago, while we were building the Pickering House. And we actually did sit right behind where I'm at with E.C. Babbert.
Probably Virginia.
And myself and somebody else. Anyway, we were back here and we were taping it with the bulldozers behind us because I wanted the community to see that we really were finally building it, you know?
Yeah.
So I remember sitting out here. Other than that, I have not really sat over here for a program. So this is bringing back great memories for me today.
Yeah, and one of the shows we have to go in the back towards the shelter and all that.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
But it is interesting here, and this is another one of those we'll see what we can do situations. So we couldn't get inside or couldn't be out in our normal spot. It's raining, and we'll see what we can do. So I guess in this COVID, you're also seeing what you can do.
Right. I think one of the terms that we keep hearing is this is unprecedented. Unprecedented, and yet when you think about it, it's not unprecedented because there's been pandemics throughout history. Just if you go back to our grandfathers, our parents, our great-grandparents that lived in the first half of the 20th century, this is what took place in the first 50 years of the 1900s. There was the 1918 influenza pandemic, which killed at least 17 million people. Some estimates are higher than that.
And that's really the percentage of people is less, the percentage is
correct.
higher.
And following that pandemic, then they were involved with World War I. Then they went into the Great Depression, and then they went into World War II. And you talk about being hit with a lot. So when we look at it unprecedented, it's unprecedented because it's foreign to us, but not to mankind.
Yeah, it's more of a here we go again back then.
Yes, and yes, exactly. Just think when 1950 rolled around and you looked back, it was very challenging. And we're facing something today that's been something that's affected humanity all along. And in the second half of that 20th century, we developed a McDonald's mentality, and that is, I go to there and my sandwich and drink are ready instantly. I don't have to wait. And I think that's impacting us today because there's pressure. When's the vaccination coming? When are we going to get this taken care of? And when we don't have that perspective that this is somewhat normative for human history rather than so unique to us, we can relax a little bit and wait for them to get the vaccination, even if it's inconvenient for us, because I'm sure it was very inconvenient for people during the first pandemic or either of the wars or even the Great Depression.
You know, Denise, I was thinking as Kermit was talking that as this crisis one after another were happening, you know, when World War II happened and they needed people in the factory, they were so used to pitching in, everybody went gung-ho.
Yes.
And with this, there's some question, do we wear the mask, we don't? Do we close the store or we don't? At that time, maybe it's a little more, let's do it.
Correct.
You know, get it done. And we've been kind of faced with that too. Some of the people we visit maybe don't have the same thought that we do.
Right.
You know, maybe don't wear a mask or maybe don't in their own house. They really have the option.
Right.
So that makes it interesting. And so you stay out of the house as much as you can.
Right. And then we get to where we're at and how we work with patients. And the first thing I think, try to communicate with them is we can't fix every problem. You know, those of us in the hospice business, we're constantly telling patients, you know, I'm sorry, this is something I can't fix. You know, as Americans, we like to fix things. That's, we're handy and so forth, but this is something that we can't readily fix. But I think there's a couple things that I see people learning during this time. The value of life. As you see families, I've talked with families that have had more meals together since March than they've had possibly for their entire married life with children.
Yeah.
And then also that pain and that sorrow of death is also on the forefront. It's not something that just happens to old people. It's affecting each of us. Have a funeral for a young man, a community patient, not a hospice patient, 28 years old that was impacted by COVID-19. And so it's bringing that pain and that sorrow of death to the forefront. And I would imagine grief departments and grief counselors are experiencing a pretty significant caseload increase at this time.
And I would imagine, you know, the general public, some of the people in their 20s, 30s, or 40s are saying, well, there's a possibility of death for me right outside.
Yes.
You know, it's right there.
Yes.
That would have to be a concern.
And as a chaplain, I think one of the first things we want to try to provide is hope. And hope is, I think, somewhat misunderstood sometimes. It's not a wishful thinking. Hope is something that's an expectation based on experience. You know, if you work through something like they did in that first half of the 20th century, there's an expectation that there's going to be an end. Right now, we're living with that thought, when is it going to end? Not that confident hope that it will end, because it has ended in the past for us. And so that's one of the things. And then we want to assure our patients. A pandemic brings a life picture into perspective. You know, end of life is something, as a 70-plus-year-old person, I've increased thinking about it, knowing that my life expectancy is shortening. It's more prevalent on my mind, but now it's on the mind of everyone.
Well, you know, and that's interesting, and now we're all somewhat in the same boat. You know, it's sometimes there's wildfires in California, we don't have them. You know, there's hurricane in Louisiana, we don't have them. We all have the potential for the flu, you know, virus.
Yes, indeed.
So that kind of, I don't know if it's called unite us or not, but you know, it's a different perspective.
Hopefully it would cause us to be united. But of course, we're in a very divisive time in this country. And I just close my thoughts with a couple of verses that I think really speak well to this. They're from Galatians chapter 5. And Paul writes these words, "You were called to be free. Do not use your freedom to indulge yourself, but rather serve each other humbly. For the law is fulfilled in keeping this one command, love your neighbor as yourself. If you bite and devour each other, watch out, or you will be destroyed by each other." And then these more familiar words, "But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. There's no law against these things. So we are not to become conceited or provoke or envy other people." And I think those are good words during this time when we have not only the pandemic, but also political unrest.
Mm-hmm.
Let's make sure that we're not being arrogant, looking down on others, provoking them, or causing them distress.
Boy, Denise, it's too bad we can't have this go viral.
Yeah.
Those are pretty good words.
Very nice, thank you.
When you're going through the
You hear
litany.
those things.
Oh, yeah. When we're going through, I would say, the litany since the turn of the century, what's been going on. I have a magazine at home of 1968, the year, from Life magazine, and holy cow, the riots that were going on, the taking over universities, war protests, it went on, and being divisive, regretfully, isn't new to us.
Nope.
I guess it's, the bright side is, as a country, we still have the freedom to voice our opinions.
Yes.
So then we made it through all those riots and the divisiveness in the late 60s, early 70s. It was quite a time. So history tends to repeat itself.
It does.
Regretfully, it's doing it in a lot of respects now. So, well, we're going to have to take a short break. Denise, it has been interesting in that we are adjusting to what's going on, as we always do, and being outside at the ambulance entrance is another example.
I like it though, it's good.
Oh, nice breeze. Too bad you can't do it here. Too bad we don't have a 3D TV or something, or scratch and sniff TV. But we're going to have to take a short break. We'll be right back.
The Frankie Smith Funeral Home and Crematory in Lancaster and the Johnson Smith Funeral Home in Baltimore have a long and wonderful history of serving our community. Feel free to give us a call at 740-653-0652. Stop in and see us at either of our two locations, 405 North Columbus Street in Lancaster and 207 South Main Street in Baltimore. Respect for tradition, regard for change.
Fairfield Federal. When it comes to our customers and our community, we go above and beyond to help. Our people make the difference.
We were retiring from Tucson, Arizona, and we made a retirement trip out around Ohio, having decided that's where we wanted to be. And we came across this town called Lancaster, and we fell in love with the downtown area, where the fountain is, and the memorials, and the flags, and all this stuff. And I looked around and I said, there's our bank right there.
There's something to be said about a community bank in your hometown.
Right. If you live in the community, you should do business in the community as much as possible. So it makes sense to bank with the community bank where you live.
Fairfield Federal is the bank to be at. If you live in this town, or any town actually, you want to bank at a local home bank. And the employees are happy here, they're conversant, customer service is through the roof. There's nothing more you could ask for.
Personal or business banking, whatever you need, we take it seriously because we know you do. Stop by today at any of our 3 locations and see why the difference is clear. Fairfield Federal Savings and Loan specializes in banking that revolves around you.
Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender.
Dagger Law has been part of the Lancaster community for more than 110 years. This is where we live and work. You'll see us at festivals, sporting events, and all around town. We consider our clients as friends, and we walk alongside you through challenging times. Whether you're a growing business, a changing family, facing litigation, planning your future, or dealing with land issues, we're right here. We are local. We are trusted. we are experienced. Dagger Law.
Hi, welcome back. Rick Schneider, Community Educator with Fairhope Hospice and Palliative Care, and joining me is our CEO, Denise Bauer. And with us is Kermit Welty. Well, you've changed your looks.
That's right. I'm much better looking now.
Yeah. Nobody tells you anything. But would you care to introduce our second
I
guest?
would love to. So we have Mark Linn, and he is also a spiritual care coordinator with us. So welcome, Mark.
It's great to be here.
People might recognize the voice from broadcasting sports and various things.
Yes, did that for several years at refreshing 90.9 FM, and I enjoyed that a lot.
So while Denise and I are talking, you hear a little, and now Denise is talking, she's leaning back in her chair. And
play-by-play.
Still there. Yeah. But how many, just out of curiosity, how many chaplains do we have?
We have 3 right now.
Okay.
Obviously Kermit and Naomi Gulkins Coulter, I believe uses both names, but she actually works the southern part, lives in Athens, and covers most of the southern area that we do.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Denise, it is interesting. Do the chaplains do areas, I guess? I don't know how they...
Yeah, we have, all of our staff are kind of, that have primary caseloads of patients. They're all set up geographically. So, they get to know the communities that they're serving and the facilities and, of course, the patients and families in that area. So there's a lot of benefits to that. Plus, it's nice for efficiencies as well, for time management and of course, mileage reimbursement. But everyone is set up in a geographical region. Nurses, our spiritual care coordinators, somewhat the aides, as much as we can, and such like that. So and we do cover a large area, so it's important to do that.
Like you say, it's the 3 focus counties of Fairfield, Hocking, and Perry, but we also do perimeters of all the other
all
counties.
the surrounding counties, so
It's a pretty big area. So, I guess, Mark, have you been a chaplain, if I can ask? I'm not a chaplain, but a pastor.
Oh yeah, I was associate pastor at Pleasant Chapel Church of God for around 3 years. I was a minister at Faith Moral Church several years ago, so I've been in ministry.
Oh, is that maybe a silly question, but how are they different, being a chaplain as opposed to being a pastor?
Yeah. You get lots of opportunity, which I love, with people to I believe Kermit mentioned, to kind of encourage, and you think of that word hope, that is kind of similar. As a chaplain, the big difference is we're not trying to talk anybody into anything or out of anything. We want to make sure they're at peace and within their belief system, whatever that means to them. So
when I'm out in the public, you brought up a good point. They say maybe I'm a different belief system. We've had Jewish, we've had different belief systems, and they're afraid of being preached to, if I can say. That's what I hear.
Yeah. I don't hear that a ton, but you do hear it. That I don't want to be preached at, and you know what? I don't want to be preached at either. That part I understand. No matter what their belief system is, especially at that point in their life where it's getting pretty real. Nobody needs to know what a horrible person they are and how bad they need to change. What they need is hope. And the one thing more than anything, I try to communicate to people who believe in God is that God is loving and merciful and relentlessly pursues us with that throughout our lives. And I want them to make sure they understand what I believe is the nature of God, because I think there's honestly a lot of bad information out there. And he's not a benevolent grandpa. He wants us to behave in a certain way out of his love for us. But that's my heart for people, is to understand. And you know what? We get lots of encouragement. Denise is very encouraging, our leadership, but patients and their families are so encouraging. And in my mind, I think, and I've probably said it. If you think I care about you, God cares infinitely more. And I try to make sure they understand that. And I do think of that word hope. We all can have hope for tomorrow, right? I mean, we all feel good. We're pretty healthy, and But folks who are facing the end of their lives, you think about, okay, what hope can I give them? And what I believe is that life's going to get really good for them again, and I tell them that pretty regularly. And it's not just words. I really believe it.
Yeah. Well, you know, Denise, at the end of life, people do kind of narrow down from physical pain to emotional pain, right down to spiritual pain. And we accept people, you know, Mark brought up the point, you know, he doesn't preach. We accept people where they are, how they are.
Yeah, and I think that's the beauty of what we do with hospice, with our spiritual care team is, you know, and they really, it's not lip service. They really meet people where they are and take them where they want to go. And, you know, they've taught me a lot over the years, and you know how to work, you know, with various things. And you know, one thing, they provide a lot of education for our staff too. I mean, because you know, really, you know, the nurses, the aides, you know, the social workers, all need direction sometime. You know, if someone does have a cultural or a spiritual belief that are different than, you know, maybe what traditionally might be for the community, or you know, various things, they can bring those things out so that we honor people and we respect, you know, their cultures and their religious beliefs and their spirituality. So it's a huge part of our team, and it is so important because it really makes up the whole person. It's a huge. I mean, we even, you know, talk about spiritual pain sometimes. Sometimes we're trying to get someone comfortable, but maybe there's something that, you know, needs to be talked through or worked through, and that is where the spiritual team really helps a lot. I mean, they're available and on call 24 hours a day, which that's huge, because I did get called to the Pickering House. The nurses, when they're on call at night, have called them weekends. I mean, there's not a day that if someone needs that kind of support, our spiritual team is ready.
Yeah, if I could tell you a quick story, the
story.
whole I don't want to be preached at happened recently. First conversation with the sister who was the primary caregiver said he did say that he would like to get saved within the Christian belief system. Said he'd like to get saved, but not today. And of course I'm like, oh, come on. I said, I promise it'll be painless. It'll be painless. And she said, well, he's doesn't want to today. I called a couple days later. Now I checked with him. He doesn't want to today. And then a couple days later, he got towards the end of his life. He was becoming, and the nurse had the wisdom, which I love, to let them know it's getting real. And if you wants to, now's the time. They called me. I went out, and it was so awesome. His mom was there, sister, and just so you know, he doesn't want to be preached at. And I'm like, don't have any interest in doing that. And I said, why don't we'll just see how the conversation goes. And his mom was there, like I said. So he came out and made some tough choices throughout his life. And I was able to share what I've kind of already said, that God is a God of grace, eager to forgive us, pursues us. And I was able to lead him in a prayer where he accepted Christ, and he had peace. And the funny thing and the awesome thing about God is his mom accepted Christ at that moment too. And unbeknownst to me, she said, I prayed that prayer with him. But those are just precious moments where, you know, you leave. And I'm sure, Denise, throughout your career, you've had to have moments where, man, I can't believe I get to do this, even though with all the pressure and all the responsibility, and man, I'm driving away and I'm going, man, I can't believe God let me be a part of that. That was awesome, you know. And those are the great moments.
I feel like we're put sometimes where we're supposed to be.
Amen. I believe that.
But you know, from my experiences of, you know, a volunteer in the home, all these incredible events happen in the most mundane or dilapidated place. It's not a beautiful building, or not, you know, harps aren't playing or anything else. It is bam. You know, it's real. Yes. And you're talking about it was real. I mean, it was one time, and I visited a patient in one of the nursing homes. They told me it's the end of life. And I went to visit, and there's a big crowd out on the front porch, and they're introducing me, and how you doing? Fine, this is Uncle so-and-so, fine, good, well, you know, where's he at? And he said, well, one of the rooms down the hall. So I go down there and come in, and it's very quiet. Nobody's in there but me. And I tell people, the sun was setting, and I swear there's a beam of light on his water cup on the little table that thing's out. he was looking down, and I said, Danny, have you been baptized again? He was a colorful person. Talk about the decisions made.
Yes.
And he just looked down, and he seemed sad. So I said, I'm going to baptize you, and I used the water and baptized him. And I said, if you've been baptized, maybe it will bounce to somebody else. I don't know if that was spiritual.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I used the rules in the back of the book, but I thought he smiled, But he looked out the window with his eyes, and then he looked down. And I waited for a little bit, rubbed his arm, and left. I was there maybe 10 minutes. And I went back out, and there's his family. The pizza guy came, and they're eating pizza and all fun and everything. And I figured, and the pizza guy was late. And if you want to put some connection to that, I think God held everybody up, held the pizza guy up just enough so he could be baptized. There's so many things that, man, that was weird.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like you ever think you're going to do that.
I had no idea.
I mean, you maybe have never done that before, but it was like in that moment, you were just moved to do that.
I had to do it, and I felt it, and I didn't plan on this is my chance. It just presented itself.
Yeah.
And you were the same way, and to have the mother, you said, was the one that also turned her life over.
Yes.
It presented itself.
Yeah.
And
God just moved, and it was just those moments are just incredible for sure.
Yeah, it's fascinating here once you get employees talking, and things pop up, and they'll mention something.
Yeah, and we talk about COVID and what's going on, and I know we're all just so over it. We're ready to life get back to normal, and I want that, and because our visits are limited, and Mark gets to feeling sorry for himself, because I don't get to see people, and poor little me. Yeah. And then I think about the families and what they go through, because some of them haven't seen their loved ones since March that I've talked to recently, so Mark doesn't have a lot to complain about when it compares to the hurt and that they have to go through. This is a difficult time and for everyone, but I do believe that I think Kermit said it. You all, we're going to get through this, and better days are coming, and it's one day at a time.
Well, you talk about you're upset that you're not doing as much as you can, or it bothers you. You were sending out notices, emails to our staff now. What's it called? Breathe in, breathe out?
Well, ours is actually called Here's Hope,
okay.
and that's a good point. That's just something we can do. And Denise talked about our staff, and everyone else, their lives are going on. They have children they worry about, and spouses they worry about, and other loved ones that. So life is happening with our staff as well. Honestly, I think our leadership gets taken for granted in all this because they're going through it too. So we came up, actually Jason came up with this Here's Hope thing that we do every week, and we just write a little encouragement of whatever we feel like we're led to communicate to try to encourage our staff.
Yeah, it is interesting, and whatever's going on, you think of the professionals and first responders. It's like they're clocking and going home. They have family at home too, who they worry about. And they're worrying about other people than us, and I think we're kind of the last responders, for the first ones.
Last responders, that one.
Yep.
And I think that is so important to support the staff with that inspiration, because they're dealing with it during work and of course, at home too. So we appreciate all of that. We just are a big happy family, and we just try to support each other.
Yeah, and
we have to take care of ourselves as caregivers to be able to care for others.
Yeah.
It's really important.
Well, one thing I've learned, Denise, and I've said it, I think, try to say it regularly, is you and the leadership here care about us, and
We do.
And you show it every day.
Well, it has been a very good show. I've learned quite a lot, Mark. I appreciate everything you told us about. Hanging in there,
Yeah.
It'll be okay.
You got me choked up on your story. Somebody wouldn't ask me a question.
Yeah, I got. Thank you. See, that's the thing. I can tell you one after another. God is so good. God is so good.
Next time we'll have Kleenex, and I think okay.
Yeah,
it'll
she's
be
gonna
good.
make me cry now.
Well, we're going to have to hit the trail, so I appreciate everybody watching Fairfield today. Mark, thank you. Denise.
Thank you.
And hope to see you next time.
Interphase Video presents Fairfield Today. Brought to you by Fairfield Federal Savings and Loan, Fairfield Medical Center, Fairhope Hospice and Palliative Care, the Fairfield County Board of Developmental Disabilities, Dagger Law, and the Frank E. Smith Funeral Home.